here is my 2011 Volkswagen Scirocco R.
This car is top spec. Heated leather seats, a DSG gearbox, pan roof.
Oh, and it's also 340 brake horsepower.
But there is one massive problem with this car.
I can't actually drive it.
Because before I got it, it had been left abandoned on a farm for 3 months. And to drive a car on the road in the UK, it has to be taxed, insured and have a valid MOT certificate.
Which, unfortunately, it doesn't.
Because this car actually failed its MOT on quite a few major faults, and I cannot wait to get behind the wheel of this car with it being the fastest one in this series to a supercar. But now it's up to me to get all of those issues fixed so I can drive this car for the first time.
So, luckily we have already made a really strong start with this car by taking it from looking like an absolute shed to looking, well, very, very nice. Dean from Dean Clean Detailing actually did a full decontamination. He steam cleaned all the interior. He did a full detail on the outside and the car is looking amazing. So now, all that now leaves me to do is start ticking through the list of all the reasons that this car failed the MOT. Once we've got them sorted, we can actually take it to a garage, get it MOT'd, and hopefully this car should be then road legal. So
I might as well start somewhere near the top of the list, which is the number plate lights. They have cost me £12.99 from Amazon, and that should be what is in this package, and hopefully they're the right ones. Which luckily they were, so we can make a start on getting the Scirocco back on the road. To change these number plate lights, all you have to do is unclip the old ones from the bumper, unplug them from the wiring harness, plug the new ones in and just test if they actually work.
boom! We have light.
And luckily they did, so I just have to repeat the exact same process on the right hand side and that should be that job taken care of.
Look at that, how quick of a job that actually was. Boom, sorted.
I think it is pretty obvious as to why these weren't working. The terminals have snapped. They look like they have definitely seen better days. I mean, I don't know what has happened to them, but the prongs, one of the prongs has snapped in here. Yeah, they were definitely not working. And not only have we just repaired the car by doing this, we've actually upgraded the OEM bulbs to these nice LED ones, so it looks that little bit more modern. And of course, we can tick that job off the list. The next one that was actually an advisory / major on the MOT was the front right indicator. But after actually having a look at the car, I'm starting to think that maybe it has since been fixed, because if I turn the ignition on and indicate right, the rear indicator is working fine, the indicator on the wing mirror is working fine, and the indicator on the front headlight is working fine. So I think I'm going to call that one fixed. I assume that maybe it just needed re-plugging in or something, because someone's been trying to mess around with that headlight, but that one we can tick off the board. The next issue that I think we should take care of is the driver's side rear handbrake fault. I am going to take a guess, and I'm pretty sure it is going to be just a issue with this caliper. So I have ordered another caliper, but I need to get this one off for the surcharge. And I think it makes sense to just quickly do the driver's side caliper, because when we come to do the passenger side, I can jack the car up on the one side and it will allow us to do the front and rear wheel bearings. So we're going to start with the driver's side. So I think we should take the wheel off, get the caliper off, and then we can take it to exchange it for a nice brand new one. So of course I'm going to start by loosening the wheel nuts and then get the car jacked up and take the wheel off, which will give me access to the caliper. To get the caliper off, there's 2 bolts holding it to the carrier, and then I've got to undo the brake line with a spanner, which did in fact snap, but luckily we can get another one of those. And then I've just got to undo the handbrake cable, and it should come straight off. There we go. One caliper. And I'm going to assume that this is the one that originally came on the car because the pistons were seized and it had definitely seen better days. And now we can go and take this caliper and exchange it for a nice fresh new one. And here we have the brand new caliper, and I want to give a massive thank you to Tashan from T's Servicing for always hooking up the parts. We also did pick up one of them brake lines. All I've got to do now is put this caliper back on the way I took the old one off. So secure it to the carrier with the 2 bolts, and then secure the handbrake cable in place, and of course fit that brake line. And that is one fresh new caliper installed. The brake line is secure and the handbrake is back in the right place. Now all we've got to do is bleed that caliper up, and that should be that job taken care of. Up. Down. Up. Down. And once I'd bled them with the engine off, I'm also going to turn the engine on and actually repeat the same process, just to make sure that everything is working as it should. Down. And after a lot of ups and a lot of downs, we managed to get a really good feel in the brake pedal, and there was no bubbles coming into my caliper bleed tool. So now I can get the wheel back on and we can call that job complete. And now we can add how much that caliper actually costs to the board, which was £46 in total. And of course I gave my old caliper in exchange. But the best part is we can now tick that off the list. And now we can move on to the next job, which is going to be the passenger front and rear wheel bearings. We picked these up again, thank you to T's Servicing. These of course are said wheel bearings. We also have new bolts, a new plug bolt, and in here is going to be the bearing itself. I'm not sure if they're the same for the front and rear. I guess that's something I need to find out. Okay, no, they are actually different. This one is going to be the rear. This one quite literally slides on and off, and then of course this one is the front. So I think we should let's just do the back first, since we've already done the back caliper. I already kind of know how it all comes apart. So let's get the car jacked up again and let's get these wheel bearings changed over, and then we can tick that off the list. So once again, I'm going to get the car jacked up in the air and remove the wheel, and it's in times like this where I really do wish that sometimes I had a ramp. But by doing that, we can now get access to the caliper, which this time, unlike the driver's side, I don't need to actually unbolt from the handbrake cable or disconnect that brake line. I just need it out the way to give us access to the brake disc, which behind the brake disc will be the bearing. But now the caliper's out the way, it gives me access to the hub nut, which have a serious reputation for rounding off because of how tight they are. So hopefully mine comes off. And luckily it ended up being able to come loose, but now I've got to try and get the brake disc and the bearing off without taking the caliper carrier off. The reason being is because the caliper carrier bolts are so hard to get to on these cars, they are almost impossible to undo, especially like mine if they've never been touched before.
There we go. Well, that is definitely making a horrible noise. So that is 100% going to be the problem. And in fact, it's quite literally just split right in front of our eyes. So yeah, we'll replace this with the new one.
And now I can slide on that brand new bearing, but I've got to figure out a way of getting this brake disc on. I know I managed to get it off, but I think getting it on is going to be a lot harder.
Right, I think I can finesse getting this back on without taking the caliper carrier off. I'm like halfway there. But now you've just got to get... Come on, this has to work. I can't take that caliper carrier off. It came off, so it can go back on without taking the carrier off. I'm determined.
And after a little bit of time spent struggling, I managed to figure it out.
Yes! Is that going to go on? Who needs to take the carrier off? No one. No one needs to take the carrier off. Whew. Right, now that's on. This bolt needs to be 180 Newton meters and then half a turn. So, let's get that in. Well, and do exactly that.
And it was only a matter of time until at least something went wrong, but luckily it wasn't anything to do with the actual car.
$180 Newton meters, and then, well, pretty much swing off it. Well, I think that's tight enough, since it's just completely snapped the socket, but yeah, I'm going to say that's tight enough. And also, it's absolutely silent. Woo! Check that out. Snapped completely in half. Right, let's get it all back together.
And getting it back together didn't take long at all. All I need to do is get this caliper back in place, line the bolts up with the carrier, and then I can tighten them up, and that is the caliper back together. And now I can get the little hubcap installed, get the wheel back on, and that is job done.
And that is the rear wheel bearing, all done, all fresh and all complete. Now I'll come out tomorrow because the time is currently 12 o'clock and we will get this front one all done and dusted.
But not before a quick trip to my local Euro car parts, because after snapping that spline set I need to go and buy some new ones. But now we can crack on with the front wheel bearing.
Now, the front wheel bearing is actually a little bit different to the rear. As you can see with this one, it comes with the main kind of hub bolt, and then it comes with 4 other smaller bolts, which of course are for the small holes that are on the back of this wheel bearing. So luckily these are all bolt on, bolt off, so you don't have to either take them to a garage and use a press. You can just unbolt them and refit the new ones. But with this one, I think the best kind of protocol is take the whole caliper off, hang that somewhere at the back, and do the same pretty much as what we did on the rear and get this bearing changed over. One other problem that we did have is the front passenger headlight. I've put front passenger headlight bulb because I assumed it was just a bulb, but on a little bit of research, there is apparently some things on these called headlight level sensors, which is this thing here, and as you can see, this is meant to be one part, and well, it has snapped off completely, so that will be the problem and the fix to that advisory on the MOT. So we will get that fixed. I don't know whether I'll have to buy a new one or I can retrofit this one to make it work, but we will see. First of all, I'm going to get this bearing done.
And the good thing with the fronts is you can actually turn the wheels, so it gives you a lot more access to the rear bolts to take this caliper off. And now that caliper's off, I can hang it to the side so it doesn't get in the way from the rest of the job. Now I just have to get the brake disc off. And with the brake disc removed, it's now time to undo that hub nut, which luckily this one came off without rounding. I'm going to now undo the 3 bolts holding the wishbone to the hub, just so I can get better access of getting the drive shaft out. And this is where I got my first injury.
That hurt. Woo! Nice.
But I'm not going to let that stop me, because now it's time to try and get the drive shaft out, which I did struggle with to start with, but luckily after a few gentle persuasions with the hammer, it did come loose.
Yes. Boom! Drive shaft out.
And now all that's left to do is undo the 4 bolts holding the wheel bearing to the hub, and this is where it could all go wrong, because these have a tendency of rounding off as well.
There's one. There's 2. Three. Woo! And that's 4.
Well, this just goes to show that sometimes things do actually go to plan, and 10-minute jobs can sometimes be 10-minute jobs. But now I've just got to try and separate the wheel bearing from the hub itself, and judging by the looks of this, I don't think they've ever been apart before.
No! No! I just snapped my favourite screwdriver. Woo! And we are out. Yes. Oh my God, listen to that. Oh wait. That's literally like, oh yeah, that is awful. And that is meant to sound, well, like nothing. It's meant to sound like that. The sound of silence. Right, new one back in. I'm going to clean this surface up so we do not get any of that horrible corrosion again if anyone needs to change it down the line. And we shall carry on.
So now I'm just going to use a wire brush on a drill just to make sure that the surface is as clean as possible for the new bearing. Now I can reinstall that bearing and start fitting the new hardware that we got in the box. And after refitting the 4 bolts that hold the bearing to the hub, it was time to get everything back together. So that's reinstalling the drive shaft, the brake disc, and of course that big brake caliper.
And although the front one did put up a little bit of a fight,
that is now the front passenger side wheel bearing, all replaced, all torqued up to spec, and all nice and new.
And of course, I can't forget to add that to the board. They actually cost me £56 for both of them, which I don't think is bad at all. And of course now we can tick it off the list.
Which now only leaves us with 2 problems to fix on this car before we can actually drive it and get it through its MOT.
One of them is an exhaust leak, which I am not going to be able to do myself. I am just going to get the leak welded up, or if I can find where it's coming from, maybe get a new gasket, but that's something we're going to have to dive into and have a look at last. For now, the last one we've got to do ourselves is the front passenger headlight bulb, which earlier on I did mention that the reason that has been a fault is because of these little sensors down here, these little headlight adjustment sensor things. This has clearly snapped. Now the problem with that is to replace them, they can get quite expensive. I think they're about £100 each. So with trying to keep costs down, and I think this would be a better future proof for them anyway, I might try and fix that, and instead of buying a new one and potentially that one snapping, I think what I should do is try and see if I can actually nut and bolt it back together, because all it needs is that rod attaching to the sensor, so when the rod moves up and down, it obviously sends a signal to the headlights and almost tells it in sync where the suspension is kind of at. Obviously this car has been lowered and it's on coilovers, so it does affect it a little bit, but we don't want that to be an advisory on the MOT. We are aiming for a clean sheet. So I think I'm going to give it a go at trying to actually repair it.
And I think the best way to get this repair done and future-proof it is if I simply just nut and bolt the rod to the sensor. That way there is almost no chance that it's going to come loose.
Ladies and gentlemen, it may not be OEM, but you are not going to be able to tell me that that is definitely not going to fail now. It is literally nut and bolted. It is solid. And now, when the suspension goes up and down, the headlights will be able to adjust accordingly.
I think that is a job well done. So now I can get the wheel put back on, lower the car, and call that job complete as well.
And just as I thought that job was complete and we could tick it off the board, I had a look on the actual MOT failures, and it says near side headlamp aim too low, near side front and offside front headlamp level sensor broken. So I'm going to assume that that means that this side, the driver's side, headlamp level sensor thing is also broken. So I'm glad I actually checked that before we got to the MOT station, because that would have been another failure. So let's get the car jacked up on this side and repeat the same process that we did on that passenger side.
And as suspected, it's the exact same as the other side. So I'm just going to use the nut and bolt technique by drilling a hole through the rod and just putting the nut and bolt through the middle and tightening it up.
And now, of course, we can tick that off the list, and we don't need to add a price because we managed to fix them for completely free. And with that now being sorted, that is pretty much all of the MOT failures ticked off the list. The only one we haven't done is the exhaust leak, which I will get done at the MOT station or whenever suitable, just to get it either welded up or a flange put in to where it's leaking.
And apart from that, we are pretty much ready to drive this car for the first time. I have ordered a few of the cosmetic bits that are going to be needed to make this car look that little bit better. And of course, before we head to the MOT station, I'm going to be giving it an oil change with some fresh oil and a new oil filter, which I think this car is in desperate need of. And even though we didn't get to drive it in this video, I think we've made an amazing start to getting this car back on the road. But unfortunately, that is all we've got time for in this video. If you did enjoy it, please like, comment and subscribe. I will see you in the next one when we're driving this car. Peace.
You wear a hat they call dad. Me, I'm the dad in a hat. You just like clubbing and clothes. Me, I like afternoon naps. 3 happy meals for the road. My oldest like counting racks. My middle one, she's in a dirt bike. My youngest is just like a mama. The mama loves me and I love her, so if she wants something, it's never a bother. 3 little ladies, my babies in one.